Chapter 1. Chariots of the Ancient Sky. Across the vast collection of Vedic writings, one encounters numerous references to futuristic flying vehicles. These crafts, known as vimanas, are said to have traveled across the skies of our planet thousands of years ago with spectacular speed and precision. They appear frequently in epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, and are often portrayed as celestial chariots in a world teeming with non-human intelligences. The Sanskrit term Vimana generally means a measuring out or traversing vehicle. Later, the term came to mean flying palace or sky chariot. Today, Vimana are towering carvings in Hindu temples in which the murti of Hindu gods and goddess are installed. It's very possible they were based on the original design of the ancient flying machines. In the Vaimanika Shastra, a Sanskrit text attributed to the sage Bharadvaja, vimanas are described as aerodynamic craft capable of sophisticated maneuvers. One excerpt, translated by G.R. Josier in 1973, reads, "The Vimana travels in the air with the speed of the wind." The Vaimanika Shastra explains that by mixing black mica solution with neem and hunaaga and smearing it on the craft's outer plates, it will look like the sky and become indistinguishable. In other words, it will become invisible. Many scholars believe the Vaimanika Shastra is a recent forgery. Nevertheless, they find it more difficult to dismiss the older Vedic epics, which portray similar sky-borne machines with amazing consistency. In Book 3 of the Mahabharata, Vanaparva, section 126, we find reports of flying chariots able to travel great distances. The Ramayana mentions Ravana's Pushpaka Vimana. Apparently, this was a flying palace big enough to transport the armies, royal courts, and citizens of an entire city. Yuddha Kanda, chapter 119. The Pushpaka Vimana sounds very similar to what modern UFO writings might call motherships. In Ancient Aircraft of Atlantis and India, David Hatcher Childress states, "The Ramayana describes a Vimana as a double-deck, circular, cylindrical aircraft with portholes and a dome. It flew with the speed of the wind and gave forth a melodious sound." A humming noise? Ancient Indian texts on vimanas are so numerous it would take several books to relate what they have to say. The ancient Indians themselves wrote entire flight manuals on the control of various types of vimanas, of which there were basically four: the Shakuna Vimana, the Sundara Vimana, the Rukma Vimana, and the Tripura Vimana. The pilots of these aerial vehicles go by many names in the Vedic texts. For example, they mention the Devas, Asuras, Gandharvas, and many others. They represent specific types of beings with unique qualities and habitats. Devas are celestial beings often aligned with order and light, as seen in the Rig Veda, Mandala 1, Hymn 50. Asuras are enemies of the Devas. These quite complex figures are sometimes malevolent, but in early Vedic texts, e.g. Rigveda 10.72, they are described in more ambivalent or even favorable terms. Gandharvas, meanwhile, are ethereal musicians. They are said to live in the skies and often act as mediators between worlds. Yes, as strange as it sounds, according to Vedic cosmology, these beings come from various domains. The guardians of cities and rulers of provinces seem to be terrestrial, whilst others come from realms beyond the physical world, referred to as lokas in Sanskrit. Lokas encompass physical, astral, and celestial planes. These are known in Hindu texts as Burloka, earth, Swarloka, heaven, and Patala, netherworld. Overall, the ancient Indian texts appear to describe a vast, tiered universe consisting of various dimensions, all of which interact with each other. The Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 8, verse 16, and Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, describe these domains as being inhabited by entities of various character, including gods or semi-divine beings. Far from being an isolated civilization, the texts suggest India was a world in constant dialogue with higher intelligences. In modern terms, it could be called a galactic society. Erich von Däniken, in Chariots of the Gods, 1968, claimed that the Vedic texts hold evidence of extraterrestrial contact. While mainstream scholarship remains skeptical, researchers like David Frawley, The Rig Veda, A Historical Analysis, 1993, remind us that in Vedic thought, mankind is only one player among many in a multi-loka drama. When these beings are described as crossing between worlds without mechanical aid, they seem to resemble what traditional religions might describe as angels, spirits, or celestial entities. The Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 11, for example, describes Krishna's divine form as limitless, multidimensional, and unbounded by time or matter. From this description, Krishna does not sound like an extraterrestrial entity. Rudolf Steiner interpreted devas as nature spirits of vast consciousness who move freely across the thresholds of reality. Whether we call them extraterrestrials, interdimensional travelers, or spiritual entities is irrelevant. What matters most is that, according to ancient Indian texts, complex beings were interacting with our world thousands of years ago. Chapter 2. The Cosmic War. Devas, Asuras, and the Struggle for Earth. At the heart of Vedic cosmology lies a battle between two powerful lineages, the Devas and the Asuras. These beings fought not only for the heavens, but for dominion over earth and other realms. The Rig Veda, Mandala 10, Hymn 72, speaks of celestial battles, where these beings fought not only for the heavens, but for control over earth and other realms. In the Puranas, such as the Vishnu Purana, these conflicts extend across different planes of existence. Scholar Wendy Doniger believes these stories are allegories of moral and spiritual forces operating within the human mind and the universe itself. However, there are many reasons to believe these stories are based on real events. The Devas often maintain a respectful distance from humanity and rarely intervene. However, the Asuras are interventionalists and appear determined to claim direct control over humans. They infiltrate cities and guide kings for their own benefit. They often introduce advanced technologies and sometimes even interbreed with humans. In this respect, they are eerily reminiscent of the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch. The Nephilim were a group of 200 fallen angels who mingled with humanity. They corrupted earthly societies and introduced forbidden knowledge against the wishes of God. As Enoch 7 recounts, they took wives for themselves, and they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. Comparisons between the Asuras and the Nephilim are being increasingly examined by theologians in modern times. There are numerous parallels. Both groups act as gatekeepers to knowledge deemed dangerous, and both alter the path of human destiny through their interference. In ancient Indian epics, such as the Mahabharata, Drona, and Bhishma Parvas, the Asuras used weapons capable of incredible destruction. This goes far beyond what you might expect in an ancient civilization. In fact, they sound more like modern nuclear weapons or directed energy weapons. The Vimana Shastra even recounts battles between flying craft that use weapons not yet known to modern science. This begs the question, are we truly inventing technology in the modern world or reinventing it? The Devas also used what some might describe as super weapons in their battles with the Asuras. The Devas were the guardians of Dharma, the divine law, and, as such, they wielded tools of elemental power. Indra's Vajra, for example, though interpreted as a symbolic weapon by scholars, could just as easily be viewed as an energy-based device. Rig Veda 1.3.2. The great battles between Devas and Asuras involve divine beings commanding fire, Agni, water, Varuna, and wind, Vayu, implying a knowledge of elemental physics. As mentioned, the Devas aimed not to rule over humanity. Instead, their goal was to safeguard cosmic balance by preserving Sanatana Dharma, the eternal law. This doctrine is central to Vedic philosophy. It enshrines a moral order whereby rulers are entrusted with stewardship of the earth, as long as they uphold justice and truth. Bhagavad Gita 2.31, Manusmriti, Chapter 7. In this image, the Devas are celestial overseers rather than conquerors. Their own realm, Devaloka, is a higher plane of existence, separate from the material world. The Bhagavad Gita 8.20 describes it as beyond the impermanent cycles of birth and death. The Devas intervene in human affairs through avatars. These are divine incarnations that manifest in times of trouble. Krishna in the Mahabharata and Rama in the Ramayana are good examples of this. Both enter the human realm to restore balance. Wendy Doniger and David Frawley have both written on how these incarnations are not rulers, but instead cosmic balancers in times of degeneration. When the Asuras grew too powerful, the Devas would call upon even higher powers for help. This often involved the Trimurti, the great triad of Brahma, creator, Vishnu, preserver, and Shiva, destroyer. Other times, it took the form of the divine feminine aspect, Shakti, which manifested as Durga, Kali, or Parvati. These celestials they often incarnated as flesh and blood characters, almost indistinguishable from ordinary humans. The Bhagavata Purana presents numerous examples of these incarnations, including how Vishnu's avatars descended at various times to defeat evil and restore righteousness. Philosopher Mircea Eliade regarded such tales as encoding a theology of recurrence, where divine forces cyclically intervene to realign the moral axis of the cosmos. The Puranas also document numerous examples of divine intervention during periods of darkness, particularly in the Kali Yuga, the current age of spiritual decay. Although Earth will sink into disarray, it is never left abandoned. Cosmic watchers will descend to steer humanity back toward Sanatana Dharma. Scholar John Brockington believes these accounts reinforce not only religious ideals, but also political legitimacy. In this scenario, these are mythic accounts created by kings and priests to strengthen their rule. Chapter 3. Krishna and the Cleansing of the Earth. The great celestial battle between the Devas and Asuras is vividly told in the story of Krishna, an incarnation of Vishnu. In the Bhagavata Purana, Canto 10, Krishna descends to earth as a spiritual teacher and a divine warrior tasked with liberating the world from a growing infestation of demonic powers. The Lord instructed Garuda to land the hill. He himself ascended it from the western side in a sacred forest on the banks of the holy Swami Pushkarini. He took his seat with his Sankha, Chakra, and Gada in the Vimana, which was profusely decorated and was studded with several towers. It was dazzling like 1,000,000 suns and was elegant beyond description. Sri Venkatachala, its glory, G.V. Chalapati Rao. Krishna's mission is a celestial response to the overwhelming burden of adharma, unrighteousness, that had taken root in the shape of corrupt rulers and violent warlords. The Puranas describe these beings as asuras reborn among men, particularly as warrior kings, kshatriyas, driven by conquest and chaos. In Canto 10.5.1.4, the text proclaims, "When the burden of the demoniac species increased, the Supreme Lord incarnated as Krishna to annihilate the wicked and protect the virtuous." This divine intervention is very similar to that of the Archangel Michael in the Book of Enoch and other Judeo-Christian apocalyptic texts. Just as Michael leads a heavenly host to cast down the Watchers and cleanse the earth of their hybrid offspring, Krishna arrives to face and annihilate a world plagued by beings who defy divine order. According to the Mahabharata, his guidance was instrumental in the Great War at Kurukshetra. This cataclysmic event was contested between the righteous Pandavas, led by Yudhishthira, and the Kauravas, the corrupt, Asura-aligned kingdoms. Krishna served Arjuna's charioteer and served as divine strategist behind the scenes. This war would eventually reset the balance between darkness and light. The Mahabharata, Book 5, Udayoga Parva, Book 6, Bhishma Parva, tells of the deployment of weapons with extraordinary power known as astras, which reacted to incantations and intention rather than sheer physical mechanics. The Brahmastra, for instance, is said to cause widespread destruction akin to current nuclear weapons, while the Agnyastra discharged columns of searing fire. Descriptions of these weapons tell of blinding light, extreme temperatures, and environmental destruction. This imagery is almost identical to modern accounts of atomic warfare. The Devi Mahatmya narrates the epic battle between Durga and Mahishasura, a demon king of Asura origin. This battle is still celebrated today during the Navaratri festival. One particularly interesting passage, often mentioned in alternative research circles, states, "An incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 1,000 suns, rose in all its splendor. A perpendicular explosion with its clouds of smoke forming expanding circles, like giant parasols." Mahabharata, Book 8, Karna Parva, 8:18-28-29. The likeness to a nuclear detonation is difficult to ignore. In the mid-20th century, Dr. P.V. Vartak and other researchers analyzed these texts, suggesting they might recollect ancient knowledge of atomic energy. Even if not literal history, these advanced theoretical ideas are totally out of place for an ancient civilization supposedly not long out of the Stone Age. In addition to this, there are many accounts of aerial combat in the skies above India from ancient times. One warrior, known as Gurkha, flew a fast and powerful Vimana into battle, launching a single incendiary device against the cities of the Vrishnis and Andhakas. The weapon, described as having the power of the universe, annihilated entire populations and reduced cities to ash. There are so many detailed accounts of wars waged with what sounds like lost technologies. One can't help but wonder if these tales are eyewitness accounts. Furthermore, the Mahabharata does not read like a moral tale. It depicts political intrigue, battlefield logistics, sky vehicles, and energy-based weapons with a high degree of specificity. We should remember that the Kurukshetra war was not only a clash of dynasties, it was a recalibration of human civilization. With Krishna as its architect and divine force, the Deva-aligned Pandavas emerged victorious, though at enormous cost. The age of Asura dominance ended, but the underlying cosmic struggle endured. Could all this happen again very soon? Perhaps so, since this story suggests when Earth descends into darkness and destructive forces rise, celestial intervention occurs. Chapter 4. The Weapon That Burned the Sky. Among the most haunting accounts in the Mahabharata is the tale that sounds very much like the devastation witnessed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The weapon described is terrifyingly precise, and is so powerful it left only scorched earth and shattered life in its wake after being fired. It was known as the Iron Bolt. This weapon of the gods was a messenger of death that annihilated entire populations, reducing them to ash. The ancient clans who had once thrived in India, the Vrishnis and Andhakas, were obliterated. The text describes a terrifying aftermath, with bodies so charred they could no longer be recognized. Pottery shattered from the heat, and even birds turning ghostly white. These effects, described in high detail, bear an incredible likeness to the biological and environmental symptoms of radiation exposure. Fallout, contamination, chromatic distortion in animal life were terms unknown to ancient India, yet they are all present in these ancient verses. This destructive force is sometimes associated with the Shakti Astra, a divine weapon attributed to gods like Indra. It is also reminiscent of Brahmastra, a weapon so potent it was forbidden except in moments of high crisis. The impact of these weapons is unmistakable. In the aftermath of the detonation, food became toxic, and the land became poisoned. Warriors dove into rivers and streams, trying to cleanse their bodies and equipment from the invisible affliction. Clearly, they were desperate to save themselves. What ancient authors called divine fire now reads like an eerily prescient description of radioactive contamination and exposure protocols. Scholars like Michael Cremo, Forbidden Archaeology, argue that texts like the Mahabharata contain encoded historical memories. They believe there were lost epochs in which technological sophistication rivaled or surpassed our own. To such theorists, these are not simply myths, but fragments of a forgotten high civilization, one that failed to use its power with wisdom. Mainstream academia continues to regard these stories as mythological allegories. But even so, the level of detail, the technological motifs, and the chain of consequence suggest an extraordinary depth of knowledge. As researcher Rishi Singh noted, whether literal or not, these accounts reflect a deep awareness of the long-term consequences of destructive power. For theorists like Erich von Däniken and Zecharia Sitchin, the presence of such advanced weaponry in ancient texts is evidence of extraterrestrial intervention. They suggest that Earth's earliest civilizations may have had contact with beings capable of transferring technology, or who themselves waged war upon this planet with unimaginable tools. The gods of old, perhaps, were not merely born out of abstract thoughts, but were real extraterrestrial beings involved in a vast, cosmic drama. In the Bhagavad Gita 4.7-8, Krishna declares his mission plainly. Whenever there is a decline in righteousness, I manifest myself. For the protection of the good and the destruction of the wicked, I appear age after age. Krishna's appearance at the end of the Dvapara Yuga was a necessary act of purification. Civilizations that had embraced technology did not have the necessary moral clarity to use it. Thus, in the cosmology of the Vedas, they were destined to fall. The mix of unchecked ambition with spiritual decline invited annihilation. This was not a punishment as much as it was a cosmic correction. This ancient warning resonates today, more than ever. In a world increasingly shaped by machines, artificial intelligence, and weapons capable of planetary destruction, the Vedic message is clear. Power without consciousness leads to collapse. It is not technology that dooms civilizations, but the imbalance between the outer and inner worlds. Thus, the burning skies of ancient India speak not only of forgotten wars and mythic beings, but offer a sobering reflection that the arc of human history has always bent toward a question of balance. And when that balance is lost, it is not just kings who fall, but worlds.